Hello, my fabulous foodies. So listen, this morning I want to share this recipe with you that I get a lot of questions. How do you make that? So I am making it for breakfast, brunch, and I want to do a quick video to share how to make cauliflower codfish fritters. All right, so the cauliflower is a superfood. And I don't say that lightly. It truly is. And it is so versatile. It's one of my favorite vegetables. And I like a fritter. I like a good codfish fritter. But I also wanted to find a way to boost up the nutrient density of a fritter. Traditional codfish fritter back home, your flour, your salt, your pepper, your codfish, your scallion, tomatoes, all the fixing to season the batter. But the flour, refined white flour, oftentimes can spike that blood glucose level. So when we want to reduce our carb intake, we have to mix it up a bit and we have to throw some rich and nutritious ingredient in. So I have recreated this recipe to use cauliflower in a ratio of 2 to 1 to the actual flour. So I have here with me in a bowl 1.5 cups of flour, and I'm going to use 1/2 of a cauliflower. I'm going to blanch this real quickly, and then I am going to use my knife, or you could put it in a blender and you could grind it down to a grain, and it will give you about 3 cups of grinded cauliflower. And then I'm going to add that to the actual flour. So I'll have actually more cauliflower in my batter than I will flour. So I'm just reducing the amount of carbs and replacing it, substituting with a vegetable, and it really tastes good. The first time I made this, I was fooling around and trying new recipes. I'm always developing new recipes. So I'm quickly putting it into a pot of boiling water, and I'm just going to blanch it. To blanch means to quickly boil in hot water and then remove, and you shock it to stop the cooking process in an ice bath. Now, I'm not going to use an ice bath because I'm just going to take it out. I'm going to use my knife and I'm going to go at it. I'm going to chop it up and put it right into the flour to make the batter. I want to make this really quickly. But to teach you how to blanch is to bring water to boil, immerse the vegetable, the food item that you're blanching, let it boil for about a minute or two, and then you immediately transfer it to an ice bath. So you would have your bowl set up with ice and water, and you put it there. It shocks it, it stops the cooking process, and it locks in the nutrient. So just a little tidbit on how to blanch using another cooking method. So today you've learned something. If you didn't know how to blanch, now you know how to blanch and what it means. So in a traditional fritter, codfish, star ingredient here, a little bit of baking powder for your batter. I have a little bit of dried herbs here, and of course pepper. I don't put salt in my batter because the codfish is a little bit salty, and I don't want it to have excess sodium. I try to limit how much soda I intake. So I just use the salt, whatever sodium is in, and I did boil this out quite a bit too. But whatever is remaining, it goes into the flour and incorporates into the batter, and it comes out just fine. I never really had any problems with my fritters being too salty or not having enough salt or flavor. It usually balances itself out. So while we're waiting on that, I like to add parsley, fresh parsley, to my batter. And you can chop your parsley, or if you have a handy dandy parsley chopper, I have this little equipment. I picked it up at the store, and let me tell you, this is just amazing. Instead of me here chopping away at the parsley, you put your parsley inside the parsley chopper, and voila, it chops your parsley for you. You are good to go. If you don't have one of these little handy gadgets, no problem. Get your knife, get the leaves of the parsley, remove it from the stem, and it's a nice rocky motion where you go back and forth, back and forth. I like chopping parsley actually because it's quite relaxing, and I feel like I get extra work in my biceps. So I'm doing two things at the same time. But sometimes for convenience and time-saving measures, I use my parsley chopper. It's quite helpful. So you can either chop the parsley using a knife, or if you have one of those gadgets that will chop the parsley for you. All right, so the parsley's in. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put in the codfish. I've already boiled the codfish, already break it into very small pieces. I'm gonna put that right in to my batter. I like my fritter with a lot of saltfish. I don't want to search for the saltfish when I'm biting into my fritter. I want to see it right there. I like the taste of it, right? And of course, tomatoes. So I'm gonna cut up a few tomatoes. I'm using cherry tomatoes, but you can use plum tomatoes. You can use any tomatoes that you have available. I have a lot of these cherry tomatoes, so I'm going to use them up. So that's what I'm using. But again, you can use different types of tomatoes. Just give it a nice small dice and put it right into your bowl. Cauliflower fritter is so delicious and highly nutritious because you're cutting out half the amount of carbohydrate from the white flour that you would have normally had in it. And the cauliflower just gives it a nice little crunch. It's really, really good. And I enjoy it, and I don't feel guilty. If I have 3 of these bad boys, I know I'm still having calorie dense food, but the calorie count is low in terms of the carbohydrate. So I'm happy with that. I'm not worried about that. I watch the quality of the calorie and not so much the amount of the calorie, right? So I am going to put a pinch of my dried seasoning in, and a pinch, about a 1/4 teaspoon of the pepper, ground black pepper, and about a 1/4 teaspoon of the dried herbs. And this is a mixture of, there's a little bit of thyme, there's a little bit of basil, and I believe there's some dried parsley in it as well. So this is what it looks like so far. What I have in there, I have the codfish, I have the tomatoes, I have the parsley and flour, and I put baking powder in there as well. I put a tablespoon of baking powder. It makes it really light and fluffy. I like it that way, and crispy. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now I'm going to, oh, and I like a little bit of spice in my fritter. So I have here some Scotch bonnet pepper, and I am going to mince this really, really fine. You know, I found this batch of pepper at the market about a month ago. I freeze my pepper so that they preserve and last a whole lot longer. So I've had this batch. I bought about a pound of it, and I got a whole lot for it, right? And it is so flavorful. Beyond the spice that it has, it is so incredibly flavorful. So I like to add it in almost everything I make. But you can leave the spice out if you're not into spice. If you don't like spice, that's fine. You can leave it out. But I like to have a little bit of spice in my fritter. But I chop this really fine because I want the flavor of it more than anything else, right? So I don't want to bite into big chunks of this. So I am really chopping this really fine. All right, so the cauliflower is blanched and I am just going to use the knife. Now typically I would use a blender and then I would just put it on grind in the blender, and then I would let the blender grind it out to the size grain that I want. But for this purpose, I'm going to use the knife to do it. Also, if I was blanching the cauliflower to use later as a side dish, maybe do a light saute with garlic later on, then I would immediately put this in an ice bath and shock it to stop the cooking. All right, there's something in the cooking process called carryover, that is known as carryover cooking, where the food, the heat that is trapped into the food after you've removed it from the heat continues to cook the food. So this is still cooking as it is, but I want that because I want to put it in the batter that it's a little bit cooked. All right, so I'm just going to use my knife and I am going to chop the cauliflower. And then I'm going to add it to the batter. So I'm really just doing this. Now notice how I'm using the knife. I have this hand to guide the knife and my dominant hand holds the knife. I have really good control. You know, a knife really just depends on your level of comfort, how you feel. But there are certain safety tips. My index finger is on the spine, on the back of the knife, right? And my other fingers hold the knife firmly, okay? And I'm just doing a rocking motion with the knife where I'm going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I'm just breaking down the cauliflower into smaller, tiny, almost like a medium-sized grain before I add it into the flour mixture that I have going on. So far, let's recap the ingredients. I've used a cup and a half of flour. I used a half of a cauliflower, which will yield about 3 cups of cauliflower. All right, and I'm gonna put that right there. I've used about 6 ounces of codfish that has been boiled and broken into tiny pieces. And then I've added a tablespoon of baking powder. I've used a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, ground black pepper. I've also used a 1/4 teaspoon of dry herbs. Now, in using dry herbs, you want to be very conservative because the dry herb is more potent than the fresh. And I did add a couple of sprigs of fresh chopped parsley right into the flour. So that's what I have. I do not use salt when I make my fritters because I really depend on the salt from the codfish to give it the sodium that it needs. And I'm watching my sodium intake. You want to make sure that you're not having over the recommended dose of sodium. So that's why I don't use it, and it has always come out fine for me. But you know, you can try on your own when you make this. If you want to add a little bit of salt to it, I would suggest that you start out very conservative, maybe a 1/2 teaspoon or even a 1/4 teaspoon, and you can taste the batter and see if it has enough salt. But don't forget, the codfish usually have enough salt. All right, so I've used a knife, I've grinded this down to a nice size grain, and I'm just gonna take that and I'm gonna put it right into the bowl. And then the last thing I'm gonna put is my green onion or scallion. and my batter is ready. And while that's going, in the interest of getting this on, I've just turned the burner on medium high to get that heated so I can, all right, so here I have cauliflower mixed with flour. It's a 2-to-1 ratio. So I have a 1.5 cups of flour and 3 cups of cauliflower. I have here tomatoes, I have codfish, salted codfish, I have parsley, black pepper, and some dry herbs. And the last thing, and of course I added a little bit of spice. I added a little bit of Scotch bonnet pepper. Now, the spice is optional. You don't have to add it if you don't want to. Last thing I'm gonna put in before I add water and mix this batter is scallion. Green onions or scallions. It's one of the seasonings that we just have to have in our fritters. It's a softer, more milder form of onion. So we like that in our fritters, right? So that goes in, and this is what it looks like now. So we have cauliflower, we have tomatoes mixed with the flour. All of this gives us a nice blend of colorful and delicious and nutritious stuff. So those of you who wanted to know how I make this cauliflower fritters and how it looks delicious, yes, it not only looks delicious, but it's actually very delicious. All right, so I have a cup of water that I'm gonna add to this, and my batter will be finished. So there we go. So now I can, there you have it. My batter for my cauliflower codfish fritter. I love this thing. Look at that. Nice and easy, nice and easy. Look at that goodness. Oh yeah. So I use organic cold pressed coconut oil to make my codfish fritter. It adds such a really delicious flavor to it. Plus it's a healthy fat, right? It adds great flavor, and it's good for your heart health. So there it is. My batter for my codfish cauliflower fritter is done. So if you guys want to know how to boost up the nutritional value in your food, substitution, making healthy substitution is a great way to do so. By removing half the amount of flour that I would normally use or is normally used in a typical fritter batter, I have reduced the amount of glucose in this dish, and I have replaced it with a nutrient-dense and nutrient-rich vegetable, cauliflower. It adds a great texture and flavor, and you're eating a nutrient-rich food. So, just a little tip from your chef, Barbara Cooking-Diva. So I'm gonna get ready to fry these up. I'm gonna put in my coconut oil. Now, you know coconut oil is solid at room temperature. So I'm using 2 tablespoons, and this batter will yield about 10 medium-sized fritters. So you see you get a lot of fritter out of half of cauliflower, which yields about 3 cups of cauliflower, a 1.5 cups of flour, about 4 to 6 ounces of salted codfish that has been boiled to reduce the sodium level out of it, a couple of tomatoes. You could use plum tomato, you could use cherry tomato, whatever tomatoes you have, you can use it, and some scallions, a little bit of pepper, Make sure you have your baking powder so your fritter is nice and fluffy, and a cup of water, right? And I'm gonna get, yeah, about 10 solid medium-sized fritter out of this. And I'm just using my spoon, right? And just gonna dip this in the oil and let it fry to a nice golden brown. And when it's done, you will have a beautiful, golden, crispy, delicious and nutritious codfish cauliflower fritters. This is your chef, Barbara Cooking-Diva, bringing you tips and ideas to help improve your nutrition and delight your taste bud. Voila!